Hey everybody, welcome to the Health Babes podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Becky Campbell, with my co-host, Dr. Crystal Hohn. Today we have Lindsay Mitchell on. She is a physician's assistant and she struggled with Lyme disease, and she was having trouble getting better with just using supplements and foods and all those things for trying to heal her body. And what she really discovered is that it was extremely necessary to do retraining on her brain. So we do this a lot with our patients. We have a lot of really sensitive patients. And before we'll work with certain people that have really trouble tolerating, supplements, foods, smells, all that stuff, we actually will send them to do brain retraining. So we're going to talk all about what that is and all the benefits of it and how you do it and all the details of it. So I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. Let's welcome Lindsay. So welcome to the show, Lindsay. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So we love all the things that you do. We work with so many patients that really need to do the type of work that you do first before they can tolerate a lot of treatment that they need. So, we're so excited about this episode. So let's start with you kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and how you created the Vital Side.
Yes. So I started this work in nervous system regulation, brain retraining as a result of experiencing a chronic illness myself. I think a lot of us have been there where, we go through chronic symptoms or have a chronic illness and we're stuck. We come up against a plateau or, some issues in our own healing journey. And that's what prompted me to get really involved in this line of medicine. So prior to getting sick and getting the diagnosis of Lyme's disease, I actually was working as a physician assistant, trained in internal medicine, and I was working as a travel PA. So I was traveling like every 6 weeks to 3 months and started to get chronic symptoms. So migraines, joint pain, fatigue, anxiety. And these are symptoms. I had never had a migraine before. I had actually never experienced that acute anxiety like I was experiencing with Lyme. And so I started to recognize, okay, something is not right. But as a practitioner, we're the caregiver. So we often don't think of our own symptoms as a problem. I thought, well, I was experiencing jet lag because I was traveling international at that point, and I was just resting more and allowing myself time to heal, but I wasn't getting better. So I came back to the States and received that diagnosis of Lyme disease and went through this process of treatment. I'm trained in Western medicine, and that's where I started. And, got a little bit better, like incrementally better, maybe saw some of my inflammation start to dissipate. But then I came up against another hurdle. I was still having chronic symptoms, joint pain, still the daily migraines, and my sensitivities kept getting worse. So sensitivity to light, to smells, to foods. That was a huge one for me. I don't know if y'all dive into human design at all, but my human design, my strongest sense is taste. And all of a sudden I was limiting my foods. So all of these things were happening, and I deviated again. Then I went down the more functional and holistic route. I experimented with Eastern treatments and really just tried everything I could to really see some changes to these chronic symptoms I was having. And I came across a blog post on neuroplasticity. So the brain, the nervous system, and plasticity, malleability, the ability to change and adapt. And what I found was when I was experiencing, this bacterial infection, coexisting with viruses, in addition to past traumas that I've experienced. So psychological traumas, having my emotional and mental parts of me impacted as well. There was this overload, this kind of toxic overload, and it caused my brain to communicate a state of danger to my body. So my body started to respond with inflammation and sensitivities, right? All of these warning signals we can easily get from our bodies that say, hey, something is wrong and you need to react. There's a danger present and it's a threatening environment. So despite the treatments that I had been receiving, I was still feeling this way and I was still feeling sick, and my brain and my body were still receiving that communication of the threat is present and we need to respond. So even after treatment, even after detox, even after, changing my entire environment, my food, my diet, the supplements that I was taking, really getting rid of any toxic product in my environment, my body was still responding like a threat was present. So I read this blog post, neuroplasticity. Okay, the brain changes when you're dealing with a chronic infection or chronic stressors, and can be still communicating that danger response even when that threat is not present. And that was like this huge moment for me, because I was thinking, I'm healthy. Why is my body still responding in this way? I've changed everything. Why is my body still responding in this way? And I always, I'm a scrappy person by nature, a lot of that rooted out of childhood trauma, which, it does shape you. But I think this is a benefit for me personally, having this like scrappy attitude, this independence.
Yeah.
And that caused me to say, no, I'm not just going to live with this for the rest of my life. I'm not going to accept my prognosis that Lyme disease is something you have to live with forever. I need to find something else. So yeah, I had that aha moment. I delved into this topic of neuroplasticity. I read books by Dr. Norman Deutsch, Joe Dispenza. They were two of the people that I started, doing this research with. I started any brain retraining program that was offered out there. And at the time there was like 3.
Yeah. Wasn't well known.
Yeah, no. So I did those, but the concept was, and that was what I held on to, was neuroplasticity. I learned about it in PA school. I'm sure you learned about it in school as well. And so, but we don't know the application and the integration in life. So I started experimenting, with these different programs, also with the books, the techniques I read. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, he works with people who have OCD, and that's a simple kind of misfiring going on in the brain. And he has some techniques that are really effective. So I was like, okay, this is something that I need to address, this misfiring of this threat response in my own brain being communicated to my body. And that's what I did. I curated these tools based off of the programs that I had done personally and individualized them. A lot of programs at the time were very top-down approach heavy, meaning starting with thought processes to impact the body. And so I included some of the bottom up regulation techniques, which does include, some techniques associated to the polyvagal theory, stimulating that vagus nerve, including the body-based and somatic pieces of, nervous system regulation. And then I started studying neurolinguistic programming, and all of these things helped me to curate this structured technique that I could do daily, along with small, simple techniques that I could use throughout the day when I recognized a symptom. And within that time period of it was like 8 months before I traveled to Costa Rica and I was surfing and like had a piece of pizza with full gluten and dairy and didn't react.
Mhm.
And had these experiences that were just incredible that I never thought I'd have again. But it was really a little bit over a year when I just started to live my life again. And in a more empowered way, because I had gone through, this time where I was so sick, bedridden for a couple of months, and then worked my way out of that experience. And so I had this whole new take on life. And so when I work with clients now, I think like it's less about getting back to where you were and getting in touch with who you are next, because we're always evolving and we're always changing. And so then I was this like more empowered person. I was like, I want to get back to work. I want to do all these things. And when I started to go back to work, I was like, I'm going to do functional medicine. And I started working with a practitioner here in Austin, who's a longtime friend of mine who helped me through my Lyme journey. And I quickly realized, I was like, oh, this is for a lot of people, but it's not for me. And so many people are really good at this.
Mhm.
I want to niche down and provide a bridge between medicine as we know it, addressing the physical body, and nervous system regulation, which is something that perhaps like a life coach or another coach will kind of, maybe a therapist will talk about. But there was that lack of kind of understanding of the physiological processes. And I wanted to provide that bridge so I could communicate that to people and say, hey, this is what's going on in the brain and body communication. These are the tools we can use to shift that response, less from a theoretical standpoint and more from, supplying that structure and, giving the science behind how the brain and body change.
That is so great. Yeah, I'm so happy you found that to help you too, and made it your life's work too, right? Which is helping so many people. We take care of so many really sensitive patients in the practice, and limbic work has been a game changer for our patients. Like we're almost making it a requirement because it's such an important part of healing. So let's back up a little bit. You talked about neuroplasticity. So for those listening who don't know what that is, can you explain that a little bit more in detail?
Yeah. So the brain and body are always communicating and communicating through the nervous system. So we have the central nervous system, we have the peripheral nervous system, and basically the role of the nervous system is to communicate to the body and vice versa. So neuroplasticity means that the brain changes and is malleable. There's also this concept that's kind of new and trendy right now called bioplasticity, which means like our own biology changes with the environment that we are in, the experiences we've had. So how we communicate with our environments and within our bodies, we're always receiving information through our five senses. Yes, that's how we receive information from our environments, but also through neuroception, which is kind of like the sixth sense. And it's picking up on the external environment, what's around us. Is this safe or is this dangerous? And that question can be answered based on our genetics, based on our past experiences, based on a lot of different things. And we're also picking up information from our internal environments. So external meaning our outside surroundings, internal meaning what the heck is going on inside of the body. So that includes the physical body, and it also includes our thought processes and how our brains are communicating with the body. So I like to mention that because a lot of times we can dissociate the body from the brain, from the mind, But in reality, all three are communicating all the time. And each part impacts the other one. So if we perceive a scent in our environment as dangerous, we're able to perceive that through the peripheral nervous system, through our senses, our brain says, oh, this is dangerous. And a fight or flight response can kick in, or maybe the freeze response, and send signals to the rest of the body to respond with this danger. And I know, Becky, you did an episode on mast cell activation, a couple weeks ago, and I'd like to use that example too. But first, I'll give this example of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So again, we're always scanning our environments to see if things are safe or not. And so we do that through the process of neuroception. And when we perceive that something is dangerous, the autonomic nervous system, which is actually part of the peripheral nervous system, but it's located in that limbic brain, switches on. And the hypothalamus, which is a structure within the limbic brain, and also the hormone control center of the body, says, hey, we're experiencing danger. We need to react because we're at war here, right? We're threatened. And the beautiful thing about the body is that it's always trying to protect you, the brain. It's designed to protect you. So hypothalamus says, okay, we need to do something about this, and sends a message to the pituitary gland, which sits just beneath the hypothalamus, and says, hey, pituitary gland, we need to send a message to the adrenal glands to really send some information to the rest of the body that a threat is present and we need to respond. Let's go. So the adrenal glands gets this message from the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland stimulates that release of cortisol in the adrenal cortex. And we know that cortisol is that stress hormone that responds in the face of danger. So while all of this is happening, neurons in the hypothalamus signal to the medulla to release other stress hormones like epinephrine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. So these types of hormones and neurotransmitters, they increase the heart rate, they increase blood pressure, they move the body into this state of fight or flight, and sometimes freeze, which takes away normal function from organs. So we're no longer focused on digesting our food. We're no longer focused on taking deep breaths. We are ready and prepared to fight. And a common misconception in the brain retraining world is like, this is a bad response, bad brain, because this acute response can become chronic and cause more of those chronic issues. So for example, for me, continued that chronic stress response loop and caused inflammation and caused sensitivities and caused these things. But the fact of the matter is this is not bad. Mm-hmm. This is actually a protective mechanism. Like, our brains and bodies are doing their best to protect. They're like, Lindsay, we want to help you, right? We want you to survive. And this is how we know how to respond and react. But at one point or another, and it's typically when we have chronic symptoms, it's not helpful anymore. And that's the point where brain retraining and nervous system regulation, using a combined top-down and bottom-up approach, can be really beneficial to then communicating a new signal. So a signal of safety. Safety is like the number one thing people are looking for when they're dealing with chronic symptoms. But the goal is not just safety. That's the first step. And the second step is balance. Balance within the autonomic nervous system, because the fact is, we go in and out of these responses all the time. That's how humans are designed. That's how animals are designed. You look at an animal in the wild, they're running away from a lion. They're going into that fight or flight response for their own survival. And then, maybe when the lion, like they can't run the lion, they go into that freeze or immobility response in order to protect themselves as a last ditch effort for survival. Well, then if the lion carries the animal back to their lair and goes and gets the cubs to share in this meal, maybe that's when the animal then takes off. So all moving through the fight, flight, and freeze response in order to survive. That's what we are designed for. But humans, and there have been some amazing studies on this, humans go in and out of these responses, but when these responses are attached to fear, that intense fear that's created in our minds, we can re-trigger that stress response again and again and again, so that even when the threat is not there, we're not being chased by a lion, or we've detoxed so much or treated the infection, whatever it is, our bodies can still respond in that chronic state of stress. So that's what we focus on breaking and breaking that pattern again and again. So the fact is, we're changing our brains all the time, but with brain retraining, we're intentionally making changes to our brain to first connect with safety and then ultimately find that sense of balance within the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, we see so many people. We work with a lot of mast cell activation syndrome, and they have a lot of sensitivities to, supplements, food, smells. And I try to explain to them, I try to talk to them a lot about, okay, listen, I'm going to give you a supplement. I don't want you to automatically, and you probably don't even realize that you're doing this. It's your brain is doing this. It's seeing a supplement, knowing it's reacted poorly to a supplement in the past, and therefore every supplement you try is going to hurt you. And this is not even on like a conscious level, really, right? And it's just it's this thing that happens and with foods, and that's why they're so limited in what they can eat. And that's why we have them do brain retraining and this type of work that you do, because we're like, your brain needs to learn that every single supplement is not a threat. Every single food is not a threat. Every smell is not a threat. But unfortunately, it's kind of been trained to feel that way, right? Isn't that what you're seeing?
Right. And I think that's such an important part, is that it's not a decision made on the conscious level, because a lot of times, with mind body work, we start to think, is this my fault? Right? Did I create this? Did I create this hyperinflammation? And that's why leading with the physiology can be so beneficial, and understanding this was not a conscious decision that you made to have this, unconscious association to supplements, but your body has memorized this response because it's likely that fear, that sensitivity has protected you in the past. So our bodies are doing their best to say, well, I've seen a situation like this before, and now I'm going to respond in this way because this is what I know how to do. It has nothing to do with your conscious thought, but through the process of brain retraining, what we can do is start to bring conscious awareness to unconscious and subconscious beliefs, and bringing those to the surface and beginning to find evidence in our environments of safety. So safety within the things in our environment. And so sometimes that looks like a simple environmental shift of like changing the things on the walls of your house and the colors in your space and how you perceive food and supplements. So food is a huge one I work with. I love working with people with food sensitivities or SIBO, kind of these inflammatory conditions and sensitivities to food. And one of the most like basic ones we start out with, aside from actually the structured techniques, is what does your kitchen look like right now? Are you putting all the food away and like storing it in these giant bins and putting it in the back because these foods are bad and scary and, they are not foods that you've been able to eat? So again, you have some beliefs about the foods that you're probably not even aware of. So what happens, and this is great for kids too, what happens if you take the foods out and you put them in some beautiful jars and you stick flowers around them and happy faces and you have family photos in the kitchen and just recreate the space to make it inviting? And what happens is, even if you're like, that's not going to do anything, well, it may not do something on that conscious level, but you're starting to make this new and positive association to food and to the act of eating and to just being in that space with food. And so that's like this snapshot, like microcosm of what we do, in Vital Side, is starting to change our associations to things in our lives. And so when you think of something like mast cell, I liked your episode because mast cells are important. Everyone has them,
And
right?
them.
We need them. They're part of your immune system. They live all over your body. We need them to survive, and they help you to fight infections. And then they warn you if danger is present, or, especially in the face of an allergy as well. But we know that mast cells, they produce mediators, and mast cells respond. That's their job when something is not quite right. And what we want to do is respect the process that mast cells have, but we want to allow this to happen without the spontaneous production of mediators in those clonal mast cells. Right. So it's not happening all the time. And so this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is bad, and this is bad. And so because the brain and body and the mind are always communicating, we can begin to bring conscious awareness of these associations that even our physical bodies have, in order to shift and change those unconscious and subconscious perceptions of the world and of the things in our environments.
Yeah, I love that. That's so exactly spot on. So let's talk about the limbic system. What is it? What's its role in the nervous system regulation?
Yeah, so the limbic system, the limbic brain, the emotional, the feeling, the reacting brain, this is often referred to as the mammalian brain, and it houses that autonomic nervous system. So responding to our environment, saying, if this is bad, we need to respond and make a change, or if this is safe. And what's interesting, and, I explained the HPA axis earlier, and that's what happens when we have a threat. But what's interesting about the limbic brain is, because it's the feeling, the emotional, the reacting brain, it has other duties as well. So experiencing this state where your nervous system is regulated, things are going well, you have that sort of balanced brain, balanced limbic system. So the body releases neurochemicals that, can increase sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, your senses to protect you in moments of danger. But generally, when the threat has stopped, and so the lion goes away, or you fight off that infection, the body stops producing these neurochemicals, sensory perception returns to normal again. And so our feeling, our emotional reacting brain, okay, we're not receiving that threat response anymore. Hypothalamus gets that information. Okay, we don't need to experience that threat anymore, and tells the other structures of the limbic brain, okay, we don't have to send this message to the pituitary gland, the rest of the body. The threat is gone. So some key players in the limbic brain, we've got the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the amygdala, which is one we hear a lot about. Amygdala, that fear processing center of the brain, that little almond shape. The hippocampus, which is responsible for forming and storing new memories. So we look at the limbic system and we're thinking, okay, it has to do with emotions, feeling, reactions, sensory perceptions, our five senses, creating these memories based on situations, and storing those memories to long-term memories. And then we also have, I love playing with senses. I think it's so interesting. Smell specifically, it's a great kind of tangible way to perceive what's going on in the limbic brain. I just happen to have this essential oil sitting here because I always love to use smell. When you take a whiff of a smell, that immediately goes to the limbic brain. And you can think about that and you can say, oh yeah. Like, have you ever been doing something and you smell something and you're like, that smells like my kindergarten teacher. And I remember when she hugged me and like gave me a cookie and you're like, where did that come from?
Yep.
You've experienced that.
Yeah.
Because our senses, that's processed in the limbic brain, and it can remind us of these memories, which is also part of that limbic brain, something that the limbic brain is responsible for doing. So like one of the quick things I have people do in Vital Side is choose a healing scent. And this is one scent not associated to you have to use this essential oil to heal. It's more of a scent that they enjoy. So maybe it's summertime right now, a citrus scent or something. And what you start using is the scent paired with one of the tools that I give you. And every time you use the tool, you take a whiff of that scent. And what you're doing is you're recognizing this is a new experience. I'm changing my sensory perception of my current reality. And because I'm pairing it with a structured tool that's meant to shift how you feel in the moment and signal safety, what happens after 2 to 3 weeks of doing this and pairing it with these structured tools daily, you can just use the scent. And all of a sudden you feel this neurochemical physiological shift in your body. And you're like, ooh, like doing that. I've been doing this for years. So just smelling for me, like doing that motion signals to my brain, like, oh, we're focused on safety in this moment. So it's a beautiful thing and a really like easy way to tell that you're making shifts to your body is when you can use that scent to create a new experience, a new reality, a new physiology in that moment. So back to the limbic system, that's what happens when we are operating from that balanced limbic brain. We're able to go in and out of those responses. But when we're experiencing a chronic illness, what happens is the limbic brain, specifically the hypothalamus, starts to communicate to the rest of the structures, rest of the brain, rest of the body, that threat is still present. So cortisol remains in the body longer than normal. and can cause issues with the immune system, but then cortisol begins to tap out. So that's when you kind of see if you get tested for cortisol and they're like, I don't have any cortisol, right? It's so low. It's not because cortisol, we just have this never ending supply of it. It's like it got tapped out. And now you're not releasing it in this, fluid way anymore. So you may see you can see a heightened, increased cortisol or very, very low.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what we see for sure. So what are some, for listeners, if they're maybe thinking, could I really benefit from limbic work? What are some symptoms that you usually see or with nervous system dysregulation?
So ways to tell is if you have that nervous system dysregulation and specifically limbic system impairment, you're constantly receiving that message of stress to the body. You think of your symptoms. Okay, do you have 5 or more food sensitivities? So this isn't just a sensitivity to strawberries. This is sensitivity to raw vegetables and gluten and dairy and, a pomegranate and, all of these different things. So it's hard to find a rhyme or reason to why you're having these sensitivities. And that's usually when a lot of people, when they come to me, they're eating like 3 to 5 foods.
Same.
And that's when you can think, okay, it's likely not about the food itself, but how I'm responding to the food. And that also is helpful because I know for me, it was so important to eat foods. Like I wanted to eat a cupcake again and not, everything in moderation, but I wanted to be able to eat a cupcake, like if I went to a birthday party. And obviously, now I have this, well-rounded diet, but I don't limit myself in food because my body is able to kind of process it and digest and all of these things and move through that process without issues. That was important to me. It's not always important to everyone, but I just like to make that distinction because I don't eat perfectly. And I know that. And so, food sensitivities is a big one. And then you look at your other symptoms. Do you have pain that comes and goes sometimes without warning of why it's there? So oftentimes too, you can maybe have an old injury and just have it constantly inflamed. And, you go to your practitioner and they say, I don't know why, there's nothing structurally wrong, but, you are receiving that message of pain again and again. So another way for our body to communicate that stress is present. And then some easier kind of symptoms to look for: anxiety, fatigue, dizziness, sensitivities to light, to smells, to EMFs. I see that. And, there are things absolutely that we can do in our environment to kind of shift these things. But my question is, how can we prepare ourselves? What my work is all about. It's not that like we live in a perfect world and we should be responding perfectly all the time, but it's about optimizing our brain body communication so much that we're able to connect with that parasympathetic rest and digest response more often than not, so that we can feel resilient in the world. So we can go out and eat a cupcake or go for a run or be out socializing with people, and we're not perceiving these things as dangerous. So for every single person, it's different for what they want to do. But that's what's so unique and beautiful about humans, is that we have that diversity and we can train with these goals in mind to dial down that stress response so we can do the things that we love again.
So how is somatic therapy different from limbic work?
Yeah. So somatics has been, a super kind of trendy topic lately. And I love it because it's really important. Uh, and I think I probably have a different view on it than a lot of people do. You may have worked with a somatic therapist that, Peter Levine, created somatics, and maybe they studied the somatics through him or through his certification program, whatever it is. Somatics is basically that bottom up approach of understanding first that trauma can be stored in the body on a cellular level. And somatics, what we do in somatics is, instead of kind of cognitively understanding why we're experiencing the trauma, we feel it in our bodies, and we're able to kind of shift and move it in a safe container so that it moves through our bodies. And so we release it through our bodies. So it's this process of releasing trauma using our bodies, using different tools. But what's interesting is it doesn't always have to be as structured as that. Somatics often too just means using the body. It's like a body forward approach to shifting out of the stress response. So it can also include laughter. It can include vagal toning, toning that vagus nerve, that 10th cranial nerve. It can include smiling and moving and dancing and playing and all of these different things. So my approach with brain retraining is less about trauma, even though to me, trauma is a very, very big word. It's not just psychological, mental, emotional trauma. It's also physical trauma, like a virus, a bacterial infection, that kind of thing. But it's less about honing in on the trauma, like traumatic experiences that have happened to you. It's more about moving through this stress response, breaking away from that pattern so that you can start to connect with safety. You can start to connect with joy and things like that. And how I look at healing is in these three pillars of addressing the physical body, addressing the nervous system, and trauma processing. And they all have this thread that connects them. And obviously, like a lot of times when you address the physical body, you can address nervous system and also, processing trauma. They're all connected. But that helps me to kind of differentiate where I'm spending time in my healing journey. And I think a lot of people with chronic illness think that trauma processing is maybe the first step they need to take. But from my experience, it's kind of the third piece. And because we need to gain that confidence, that physical evidence for change, that we can shift out of this stress response and begin to connect with safety. And that helps us to feel more capable, stronger, more empowered, starting to live our lives again. And then if you want to address that trauma piece, which a lot of times somatics, it can be incorporated again in nervous system regulation, like how I use it, but also in trauma processing. So getting into those specific situations, moving through them in your body. But by the time you have addressed the physical body, nervous system regulation, you've gotten into a good flow with it, then you can move to the trauma processing if that's something that you want to do in this lifetime. It's not for everyone, but I personally think it's something that we do forever. It's not just one and done. It's this continual process because we live in a traumatized world. So I first recommend mostly, not all the time, but mostly for chronically ill people to get in a good flow with addressing the physical body, addressing the nervous system regulation, gaining that evidence for change, and then trauma processing, using that somatic work as, Peter Levine designed it as kind of that next step in the healing journey.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that so thoroughly, because people do get confused with a lot of the different therapies and things like that. So for listeners, if they're like, okay, what are some simple things that they can do to really calm the nervous system that they can take away from this?
Yeah. So definitely start to look at your environment today. We think generally, as humans, we kind of have this idea that, oh, I'm going to do this routine. I'm going to do it things in the same way. And you expect a different result. So you wake up in the same place, doing the same routine, everything's the same. And then we're like, and this is going to make me feel better. It's kind of silly though, looking at your routine and saying like, wait a second, that doesn't even make sense. You have to do things differently to create a new outcome to any situation. So the first thing you can do today is start to change up your routine. Like, do you shower in the morning? Can you shower at night? Little simple things. My whole perception is little 1% changes kind of creates that sustainable change in your life. But this is how we start to create little neuroplastic changes to our brains. And when we start to change things up just a little bit, our brains start to catch on and it creates more of that plasticity. So change up your routine, change up your environment. Are there things in your environment that you can add? Can you add more live plants or fresh flowers or beauty or colors to your environment? Are you living in the same 4 sick walls every day? I remember something I did was I had this like really, really soft shirt, and that was like my sick shirt. And I wore that pretty much every day because I had all this pain all the time. So what I did was I put that shirt away for a while. I started to use different clothes in my closet, even in the house. Again, changing things up to create a new reality, a new environment, a new response, a new outcome. I still have that shirt today, and I'll wear it out instead of wearing it in the house. And it can be as simple as that, is making those changes again, maybe unconscious associations we have to things, bringing that conscious awareness. And then simple tools that we can use throughout the day. So an easy one, an easy-ish one is, vagal toning and being able to stimulate that vagus nerve so that we can communicate that sense of safety to the brain. So being able to take deep breaths where you feel your belly move in and then distend out. So even coming back to that, like 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner before you eat, being able to spend a minute of just inhaling in, exhaling out. And a go-to breath of mine is the 3-6 breath. So inhaling for 3 seconds and exhaling twice as long for 6 seconds. So doing that for about a minute before you eat can help you to, again, tone that vagus nerve, send that message of safety before you eat meals. And the last one I'll mention with the vagus nerve is humming. So humming the happy birthday song twice over. And, you feel that vibration. And what that does is it stimulates that 10th cranial nerve. You can maybe even feel it in your diaphragm, and go slow with that process. And so quick little things you can do to kind of shift and create that safety in your life without really having to think about it. But after you do any of these tools, pause, close your eyes, and see if you notice that shift. Safety can feel uncomfortable at first, and it is for pretty much all of my clients. So what we're doing is modeling safety to our bodies, and even saying like, hey, it's okay. It's safe to feel a sense of safety, because it's likely not something I've experienced in a very long time. So introducing these quick, small tools throughout your day can help you to uncover what it is like, what it feels like, what it looks and acts like to connect with safety.
I like the ice trick that you have on your Instagram. She has a really good Instagram.
Yeah, you do.
And she gives you little hacks like on her reels, like do this for anxiety or whatever. But tell us about the ice.
The ice one is great to do in the summertime. Like I live in
Mhm.
Austin, Texas, and it is so hot. So you can actually either there's like an ice roller, they sell them on Amazon, or you can just take an ice cube and hold it on your chest. And if you have an ice roller, you can roll it on your chest or move that ice cube around your chest and give yourself a little massage with that ice roller or that ice cube. You can move it up your neck. You can move it to your, facial muscles and give yourself a little like temple massage with the ice cube. I've done it with both the ice cube and the roller. Like ice cube will just get a little bit messy, but the roller is also really nice and contained. And you will feel that difference. So especially if you're experiencing that anxiety in the moment, the ice roller, being gentle with that ice roller, stimulating that vagus nerve, but also creating that sensation. Like a lot of somatics is like loving sensation with your body. It can feel really, really good.
Yeah. So tell us about your Vital Side training program. And we'll link to that in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah. And there's also a program too that I can offer, listeners today called Reset, which is like a taste of brain retraining. So if you're not fully ready to dive into a fully comprehensive brain rewiring program, Reset is a 7-day free trial that you can try. So you get a taste of what brain retraining is. So each video is 7 minutes or less. And I give you information about how the brain changes and then a quick tool to start to introduce throughout the day. And that's been really beneficial. The first month I launched this, I think I had like 1,000 people sign up. And then I was like, oh, this is really cool. So many people are signing up. What's going on? So I emailed them and I started polling them and asking them questions there. And they were like, this is just exactly what I need, because maybe they didn't always have a chronic illness, but they were going through a breakup or they were just experiencing acute stress because we live in 2022 and things get crazy. So it's a really great like baseline introductory program. And I can send you the link for that and you can try it out for 7 days. And then the next level up from that is Rewire. So this is a fully comprehensive program, science behind how the brain changes, tangible tools to make changes to the brain. It is a 6-month commitment because that's how long it takes to shift and change. Creating neural pathways in the brain, it can be very, very fast, but creating new neural networks in the brain, it takes time. So about 6 months of using these techniques, using these daily tools. And this is for people who have those chronic symptoms, those chronic diagnoses, and shifting out of that chronic stress response, accessing that parasympathetic rest and digest response. And with that comes, you can get involved in group sessions. You have this online community of thousands of people retraining alongside of you. You can do private sessions with me. And then there's also some really great other tools. Like I've got this regulation station, which has all of these 35 plus state changers in it that you can use throughout the day, all 7 minutes or less. Yeah. So there's a lot of great stuff, but if this is new to you and you're like, I
want to dive in a little. Yeah.
Dip my toe in, then I would start with Reset.
Okay. So we'll link to both of those in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You've been amazing. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so I do offer a lot of really great tips and tools on Instagram. So you can find me at my Vital Side on Instagram. And you can also find a lot of really great resources at www.vital-side.com. I've got a 34-minute video on my story, the basics of nervous system regulation. We do give a lot of free stuff out first so that you know what you're getting into, because brain retraining can feel and seem really daunting and intimidating. You're like, I don't know if I want to change my brain. But this is all intentional changes we're making to the brain. So you choose, you decide, and it helps to hear my story and other people's story too. There's a lot of great testimonials on there. So you can find that on my website.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was so great.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. And if you love this episode, please leave a review. It only takes a couple minutes. And you can find out more about us on drbeckycampbell.com. And you can follow us over at Instagram on @HealthBabesPodcast, @Dr. Becky Campbell, and @Dr. Crystal Hohn. Have an amazing day.